So, welcome to the Embodied Learning Systems YouTube channel. I'm here today with my colleague, Madeline Schwartz, and our topic today, I have to read it because I don't remember anything, is how to engage your audience by being a good storyteller. Madeline is an expert in communication, specifically for people that you could call introverts. And we've known each other for a long time. So I thought it would be great to have Madeline on because a lot of my audience is embodiment teachers, holistic practitioners who are often very sensitive kinds of people and super smart, but not always outgoing. And so marketing is a challenge, and speaking and presenting yourself in front of large groups of people is a challenge. Most of the folks in my audience are like super good at one-to-one or small groups, but it's those larger groups of folks that are just really hard to handle what happens in our bodies and our nervous system. So welcome, Madeline. How you doing today?
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. It's always nice to see you, Claire, and it has been a long time that we've known each other.
It has been a long time. Madeline and I know each other. We were just talking about this. You were in career transition. You had been a book designer working in publishing, right? And then you moved into doing 3D design in display windows and stuff like that. But you were stressed out. Is that right?
Yeah, well, so I was actually a book publicist.
Oh,
That
you were a
was,
publicist. Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah, I was a book publicist for a design book publisher. And so we produced a lot of big, heavy coffee table books and art monographs. And then I had actually injured myself really badly. So I had a repetitive stress injury, which is what made me transition out of that and
Yeah.
into window display design. So I went back to school. I wanted to do something more hands-on creative. And that's how I got into window display design, which is what I was doing when we met.
Yes. And you were absolutely determined to learn more about your body and take better care of yourself because you were still had these chronic tension patterns. And I think I was teaching this group class at this super funky downtown dance studio, that smelled like sweat and dust. But you came to every class that I took. And I remember that we stayed in touch with each other. I think just because we enjoyed each other in a certain way, but also because you were interested in what I was doing. I think you were a guinea pig for a couple of my experimental forays into what I was teaching. And then you started to transition and you created this whole new career for yourself. So yeah, tell me a little bit about how that happened.
Yeah, well, I spent about 10 years working in designing and building window displays, experiential marketing events, and retail environments for multinational brands. And there were a lot of things that were fun about that job. It was exciting to see my creative work in stores all around the country. But after a while, I got totally burnt out on the hours, as a lot of that work is done when stores are closed. So
Oh,
it,
wow. Yeah.
yeah, included a lot of overnights. And then I worked for, one of the companies I was working at, I was managing projects on 3 continents in 4 time zones. So it included a lot of conference calls at 8 in the morning and midnight. And after having a child, like I just was not able or willing to keep up that schedule. And I was looking to do something else. And had a pretty disparate list of possibilities. And I hired a career coach at the time to help me narrow down those choices.
Yay, get some help. It's always helpful to get help, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, it was really helpful. And in the midst of that, the company that I was working for at the time went bankrupt very suddenly. And
Perfect.
within a week, I was at a job site at a trade show. I sprained my ankle. And then I came home and a week later got laid off from my job. And I just took it as a sign from the universe, like, this is not what I am meant to be doing. I, came to the realization that I didn't really like project management, which is what I was doing at the time, that was not the best use of my skills, and that I wasn't going to go get another project management job at a different kind of company. I decided, I've always wanted to start a business. This is the thing I've been talking about for more than, 10 years. Like, this is my chance. And so I decided to do a coach training program. And I started my business directly after that. And the reason that I focused on communication is that as a designer and then as a project manager and an account manager working with creative teams, I saw that the people who were really, really good at the creative part of their jobs weren't always good at being able to talk about their work and sell it to other people. And that is the problem that I set out to solve.
Oh my God. I just it's so great to hear you put that so clearly, because I see it also in my field, because I love to work with people that are creative, a little bit more innovative than the average person, who are taking embodiment work to a new place, trying to reach new audiences. That's really what I'm all about, because the world is becoming so disembodied, more tech, less biology. It's like we're getting so disconnected. And I think everybody deserves to have some embodiment skill so that they can stay in touch with their body. And you can see how that served you so well, right? That you could use your body as a sounding board to make better choices in your career. So it's not like you're some dance expert or something, but
it has served me really well. And it's also, there are things that I have learned from you and from other body practices and other practitioners that I have worked with that I bring into my coaching now to help people calm their nerves when they are speaking in high profile settings or giving presentations and feeling really nervous about it. It's so helpful to have these body practices as well as mindset practices that I've learned from coaching, and then specific communication strategies to bring those all together to help people overcome their fears of getting out there and talking about their work more.
And so when you first started, you were like communication coach for introverts, or I wrote things down like you're the communication coach for quiet thinkers with big ideas. And so like what I'm hearing is that these are the folks who are introverted in the sense that they have a really deep inner world. And that's where there's a lot of their life and imagination and activity, which doesn't necessarily mean they're shy, but that's where the life of the party is. And sharing that inner world with other people, there's just a lot of skill involved in that transition from the inner experience and idea to the outer expression. And for body workers, it's similar. We have skill in communicating with touch or through our nervous system, but considering an audience and how to really work with an audience and how to engage an audience, it's a totally different picture. And in terms of storytelling, we often start to geek out when we tell stories. we start to geek out on these details of anatomy and stuff, and we lose our audience. So I know we may talk a little bit about that later, but is there anything else I left out about who you are that you'd like to bring into the picture before we give the audience some tips?
Well, I loved how you described introversion as having this deep inner world, because we live in such an extrovert centric culture here in the United States.
Yeah, we do.
And I think introversion and shyness often get conflated, and not all introverts are shy, and not all extroverts are comfortable in social situations or sharing their ideas. And I think the most important thing to remember when it comes to communication is that communication is just a skill. It's like softball and knitting. It's something, it really is. And, that was something that I didn't learn until I was an adult. And, to tell you a little bit more about my story, I used to be terrified of public speaking. I was always good at connecting with people one-on-one, one-on-two, but anything more than one-on-three left me heart pounding, mind spinning, hands shaking, all of the things. And learning that it is a skill that you can practice like anything else that you have picked up over your life, like embodiment practices.
That's right. Simple skills, just one on top of the other,
Right.
Building it, playing with it, getting it to flow together. Just simplicity is in skill building is so important. Yeah.
Right. Take it one step at a time. And so for anyone who's watching this video, if you don't feel comfortable now in your communication, just know that that is not an indication of how you will feel in a month from now or in a year from now.
Right. Right. Like it could change.
Yes.
Yes. It's not a permanent state. So, what's the first, like, I know when you're dealing with individuals, there's always a different first thing that you might start with. But is there like one, this is departing a little bit from what we were planning, but is there one thing that you find is sort of like your favorite go-to for that first fundamental communication skill? Like, what would you say that is? I mean, we're going to talk about storytelling, but what would it be? Maybe it's changed in your thinking.
Yeah.
You've gotten better at this.
There are really two things, Claire. So one is to be clear on the message that you want to impart. So that means like knowing what you want people to take away from your presentation, from your meeting, from your talk, from your conversation, like really knowing that ahead of time is one of the most important things, because if it's not clear to you, it's not clear to anybody else. But the second thing is around the mindset. And I really do think of communication not just a set of logistical skills, but a mindset. And by mindset, I mean the way you think about it, your perspective about communication and about your skills as a communicator. And when you change that, it shifts everything, because otherwise you could have all the books, all the videos, all the classes, but if you don't change how you think about communication and you're constantly running this negative soundtrack in your head, you could have a really well-rehearsed presentation if you're a business owner and you're, going to get in front of your audience, but then the whole time, if you're, in your head saying, I'm bombing, I'm terrible at this, I'm never going to get better, like that is going to affect your confidence and your ability to connect with your audience.
Right. So mindset is a really big word. And let me just throw this out, because I think the main message that I wanted to give our audience today was about storytelling. But specifically, I think sometimes in the embodiment world, we think that when we're trying to tell people about the wonders of what the work can do for our potential clients, if they would invest in themselves and get that support, we think we have to exaggerate the benefits of the work. And I think exaggeration is picked up by an audience instantly, right? That feeling that you have to push, that you have to tell a bigger story than it actually is, when there are these lovely little delicate changes that happen in our clients that can be so meaningful. And we think if we tell those stories, people won't be impressed enough. So that's one big thing. Like, one big pitfall, which wasn't on your list, is like thinking you have to exaggerate to get your message across.
Yeah, well, that reminds me of a client who I was just working with, who's a creative director, and we were working on updating her LinkedIn bio, among other things. And I was helping her edit out things that I didn't think needed to be there, such as award-winning designer, because then it went on to include some of the awards that she has won for various projects. And so often one of the like a mistake that people make is we put big claims into our networking pitch, for instance, or how we talk about our work. And that is like, strangers have no reason to believe you when you say those things.
I'm the greatest.
Yeah. But when you tell a story, the amazing thing about stories is that people draw their own conclusions.
Mm-hmm. You give space that's the engagement right there, is for the person to sort of start munching on the story and go, what does that mean to me? How does that sit with me? Not right. Like, what does the storyteller think about it? But like, what does it mean to me? Mm-hmm. I make my own meaning from your story.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So if you want someone to come away thinking that you are, and this is more of a corporate example, but the first thing that's coming to mind, like detail oriented, don't tell someone you're detail oriented. Tell them a story where you were really attentive to the details and the impact of that for the success of the project. And yes, they will walk away knowing, oh, like this person is really detail oriented, and that's going to be useful to our team and our organization for X, Y, and Z reasons.
And if you have all the awards and you've listed them on your resume already, you don't have to lead with that. It's there. They're going to see that. You have to trust they're going to see that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I got completely off my my list, but yeah. So let's give our introvert friends a little bit of, do you consider yourself an introvert?
Oh, for sure.
That's so funny. You're such a great interview for an introvert.
Well, I am definitely an introvert. Like on all of the personality tests, I come up introverted, but I would describe myself as a very friendly introvert. Like, I like meeting new people. I just prefer to do it in smaller groups and quieter spaces.
Yes.
Yeah, but I am fascinated by people and getting to talk to people.
Yeah. So I think I'm a shy extrovert so far from our talking about this stuff. But so what are introverts good at? I've heard the term superpower, that there are superpowers, which is one of my favorite terms. So yeah, what's the,
well, so there are a number of things that introverts are really good at, but a few is that they tend to be super creative, super observant. That relates to that deep inner world that you talked about at the beginning. And generally, they're great listeners because they tend to want to absorb things and observe and listen before they speak. And that is an incredible skill when you think about communication, because listening is 50% of communication, but we tend to forget that and think that we need to do all of the work.
So if you've got a team or a group that is struggling, if you put an introvert just into the room, they're going to be gathering lots of information about what's really going on. They're going to really be fantastic at gathering data and information.
Yeah.
But then the trick is people don't listen to the introverts sometimes.
Yeah, or they don't make space for the introverts to chime in or consider the conversation. And so, often the quietest people in the room have the best ideas, but you might never hear them if you're not really purposeful about creating that space for people to share.
Exactly why I wanted you on. So let's see. So what are some of the biggest pitfalls that you see around storytelling? And there's so many different contexts where you might use storytelling. So I heard you talking about things like a job interview, where they, always want you to tell some kind of story that makes you look good. But I think also for people in client-based businesses, we want to tell stories about what happens in our work and what happens for our beloved clients, and just what a kick we get out of when they succeed and when they start to see what their superpowers are and be able to really use them. I mean, like right now, I'm thinking of a very introverted teacher that I know who's just fantastic. And how great it would be if that person knew how to create better conditions for themselves in their work, so that their superpowers could shine. So what was even my question? I just kind of went on and on there.
So some of the pitfalls.
The pitfalls.
Stories. And, first I just wanted to share a stat about stories, is that the human brain is wired to remember stories. So you are 22 times more likely to remember something that's wrapped up in a story as opposed to a fact alone. And that's why, as a business owner, stories are really magical in showing the impact that your work can have on your clients. And a few pitfalls that I see people run into is that, number one, you're telling stories that are too long. And this, I think we've probably all had that experience at networking events where someone starts to tell you their entire life story. You're just kind of leaning back in horror. Or I think about Goonies. I'm a child of the 80s. If you've ever watched the movie Goonies, have you seen it?
Sorry, no. I'm too old.
Well, then I don't even need to go into that. But at a networking event, like if someone asks you, what do? You don't need to tell them everything you've done since graduating high school. You can give them the highlights reel. Yeah. And so that's one. And, number two is telling the wrong story at the wrong time. This can come up a lot on job interviews or, maybe in a sales call where you start to tell a story and think it's the perfect example. And then midway through, you start to doubt yourself and think, oh, why am I telling this story?
This is actually, I think I've done that quite a few times. Like Oh, that was like really sad, or that doesn't really, it's not really relevant.
Mm-hmm.
It's like 30% relevant. And, you just have to forgive yourself because you're like, I missed the mark. Oh, well,
Yeah, well,
you know.
I like that you added that because for a lot of my clients, I find they spend a lot of times beating themselves up after that experience, regretting telling the
Oh,
story instead of another one. And so I definitely agree with what you said. And part of my process when I work with people is to give them a way to evaluate all of their speaking opportunities so that they spend less time in that rehashing and just take the learnings to do it better
to
next time.
reflect. Yeah, to have
Yeah.
some reflection time. Oh my God, just build it into everything. If you didn't like get onto what we do when we're anxious, or what I do when I'm anxious, is I scroll on my phone. After a bad experience, I just go, I'm just going to look at Instagram for a half an hour until I feel better. But if you didn't do that, if you sat with the feelings, if you felt uncomfortable, there's usually something there. Maybe turn it over with a friend, note it down, and then you can make a change the next time. And I would say 90% of the time, if I have a chance to check in with who I was talking to, they'll say, I have no idea what you're talking about. I didn't even notice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You
And it's
know,
an important thing to remember that often the things that we're really hung up on in terms of our own communication, no one else is noticing because they, like all the other people that you're talking to, are just as much in their heads as you
right.
are in yours. So they're not noticing the things that you're worrying about for the most
No.
part.
And it's just such a pleasure, isn't it though, Madeline, to like, sorry to interrupt you, but to like um know that you're working on something, and then know you're getting better at it, and see it affecting people even though they don't know that that's what's happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In my work, I call it the 5% strategy. So being able to identify like what went wrong in
Yeah.
a conversation or in a presentation and just decide, okay, this is the one thing that I can do differently next time to make it 5% better.
Love it. I love it.
Yeah. So let's go back to the third storytelling mistake,
Oh
which
yeah.
is that you're telling stories without knowing the ending. And this can result in really long and rambling stories, where someone asks you a question and you think of a great example and then
Yeah.
you don't know how to end it, how to get people to the conclusion or even what the conclusion is. And that's where you can really lose your audience. And sometimes people get so self-conscious and nervous that they might just kind of trail off. And so it creates a lot of confusion for your audience.
Yeah. So it's really about the ending. Endings are so challenging for folks. Um, I've noticed that even as a teacher, that usually like a session with somebody ended 5 minutes before I ended it. Like I needed to just let it end on a good note where something had transpired and we were done, instead of trying to cram in more at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great tip for stories. And one of the storytelling hacks that I teach people is to start with the ending of your story. So if you're having trouble writing a story, figure out what the takeaway is, or the big lesson, or the moral of the story, and start there and then work backwards.
And then work backwards. Yeah. Fantastic. So I think that that's as much as we need today. I think that's a really beautiful end to end on ends. And what a fun interview. It's like interviewing a communication coach, like, you make me look good. I love it.
It was so nice to talk to you today.
Yeah, thank you, Madeline. So, how can people get in touch with you? I'll put everything in the description box below. Is there anything you're doing that you want people to know about, or how can they get
Yeah.
in touch with
So
you?
people can find me on LinkedIn. or my website, MadelineSchwartzCoaching.com. And for anyone who's thinking specifically about how to be more clear and concise in your stories, I have a resource on my website, a 5-minute planning guide to help you find that clarity. So then you can be clear when you get in front of your audience. And people can find that at MadelineSchwartzCoaching.com/get-clear.
Cool. So that'll be that'll be a clickable link, I hope.
Fantastic.
For the folks that are listening. Thank you so much. And it's been a pleasure to know you all these years. And we'll just stay friends. I would say my ending is that in terms of networking in your life, I love networking with people that I actually like. It's so easy. And I just want to acknowledge that pleasure of all the years we stayed in touch this way. So peace and love, folks. Thanks, Madeline, for coming. Bye.
Bye.